Hey folks, it's Ardwulf. Welcome. We have an unboxing today, and it's a bit of a special unboxing. This is the very long-awaited Deluxe 5th edition of the Russian campaign from designer John Edwards and GMT as the publisher. I'd like to give a shout out to John Kranz, who thought I was somehow important enough to see a copy of this. So thank you, John, much appreciated. And we've got the mounted boards to take a look at too. So the first thing we notice is the striking cover, which of course is a callback to the cover, the very memorable cover of the Avalon Hill edition. This is a classic game that still gets played a lot today. It is a cornerstone war game of the history of the hobby, originally published by Jedco, later picked up by Avalon Hill, which I think is how most people remember it. And it's recently been redone by Compass Games in their Jedco 1974, I believe, edition, which is a pretty faithful, obviously with new graphics, new version of the original Jedco version. This, on the other hand, is a 5th edition, which has some revisions and changes, and I believe a whole bunch of optional stuff. So before we get started, let's first of all observe that this is in the standard 2-inch GMT box. There will be a quiz on this later. On the back of the box, they've added a new column, a new metric on the back of the box of GMT, replay value 8. I'd say that's reasonable. Complexity is rated at 5. Solitaire suitability is rated at 8. And it looks like there's 5 scenarios in the campaign game. Game design, John Edwards. Game development, Tom Gregorio. Project director, John Krantz. Package art and logo designed by, obviously, Roger McGowan, and graphic design by Todd Davis. I'm not sure if that means that Todd Davis did the map or not. We will see the full credits when we get into the game. So let's open her up and see what we get here. Now, I have seen the components to this already because it was on a table at Winterfest. And it is a very nice looking game. And I think we're going to see some things that surprised me a little bit that I wasn't sure that I had known were going to be in here. And you may be surprised too. Let's first of all start with the Russian campaign rules booklet. Now, I believe the original game had something like a 12-page rule book. It is a very tight game. The Compass reprint from the Jedco version has like a 16-page rulebook with some optional rules and stuff. This, on the other hand, feels like a 36-page rulebook. Not quite as good at it as I would hope. Well, that's new and interesting as well. There are barcodes you can scan to get to rules questions or to propose variant or house rules. Very interesting. Artwork by Todd Davis. I would indeed interpret that as a Todd Davis map as well. So we look at the rulebook. Print on, I think, the average, really, but larger than the last couple things I've looked at. This is full color on a matte finish paper, which is my preference, so I'm glad to see that. Full color, nicely illustrated. Game rules, not incredibly dense here, come to roughly 19 pages or so. And then we start getting into the optional rules. And it even says here, sections 1 to 25 detail the classic Russian campaign rules that are very similar to those associated with the earlier editions of the game. Here's some extra rules for SS replenishment, industrial evacuation to move the Russian factories, historical weather, battle groups, artillery, national restrictions. So there's quite a bit of optional stuff here. A lot of this, that the options may have appeared previously somewhere, whether that was in the general or whatever. So there's quite a lot of optional rules, actually, like 10 pages of optional rules. The Japanese gambit. Okay, that's interesting. Option flowchart. The Russian campaign strategic political variants. So the back of the book, up to almost half the book, is taken up with optional rules and variants, and then we get a developer's notes by developer Tom Gregorio back here. Here's the credits, which we've already seen. We do see an index, which looks like a pretty standard GMT index, and a list of the contents, but we don't need to see that because we're going through everything right now. So let's lay out the maps, and I'll mention that there are 2 maps. Okay, and some player aid cards. Quite a few player aid cards, in fact. So in lieu of, let's observe that the maps are on what I would call a satin finish paper. It's pretty heavy, feels really good. However, GMT, as a separate thing from re-releasing the game, has also made available a set of mounted maps. Now, it is a 2-map game. Big hexes, big counters, I understand that. However, that's the thickness of the box. So, I'm not really clear on why. I mean, if there wants to be, I actually kind of like that there's an option for a mounted map. If you don't care about that, you don't have to deal with it. But, you know, you could maybe get all the stuff back in this box, but there's going to be literally like 1/8 of an inch to get the entire rest of the contents in back in the box once you put these maps out. Now, these are, you know, pretty much the standard GMT mounted map stuff. So let's unfold one of these and take a look at it. And it's certainly, it's got a nice clean look to it. I think it would be unseemly were Russian campaign of all games to get an overdone map. And that is fortunately not what we have here. And of course I got stuff sitting just off camera that's preventing me from laying it out flat. So let's take care of that. All right. Now I don't have 100% flat surface this is laying on, but it is pooching a little bit. It doesn't look like it's pooching all that badly, but this is one reason why if it's a multi-map game, it's a 1-map game, that's a little different. I don't consider a mounted map to be an incredibly huge selling point necessarily. But certainly this is nice. The board feels good. It's got a nice smooth finish on the back, and it is kind of that laminated type of thing that the better mounted boards are. And it does have sort of a nice satin feel to it as well. So there are a pile of player aids. Let's take a look. Oh, what's this? Okay, I'm not sure what this is. That's interesting. Now there is a box insert, which obviously is going to go in the trash, and a red 6-sided die, which is all you need for this game. We'll put that in here for now while we take a look at the player aids, of which there's a decent number. So here's the main player aid here. On here is the very simple and very traditional combat results table. That is what it says on the tin. This is, after all, Russian campaign. The movement allowance chart, which is kind of one of the things about this game. The terrain effects chart. There's not a ton of different kinds of terrain. There are also special rules on the card for Gulf of Finland and Sea of Azov movement, and the air power availability card. And there are 2 of these cards. And these are on, again, I'd say satin finish medium weight card stock. They're perfectly serviceable. We have a separate weather chart. You know, since there's a variant for historical weather, it would have been kind of cool if they'd put that on the back. And then you could just, okay, it's mud now or whatever. Here is a separate card with a CRT and a movement allowance chart on the back. So there's 3 of those. And then we get some order of battle cards. Looks like they're for the scenarios. This is the Bagration or Bagration scenario, the Fall Blau scenario, with the Axis and Russian orders of battle. And it looks like these are nevertheless full map games. And we've got these for the standard game, aka campaign game. And this is for the optionals game. So there's like a ton of optional units here as well. And there's also one for the Axis. So I always love to see setup cards. So I am delighted that those are in here. I would like to see that more often from more games, from more publishers. And GMT does it every once in a while, but not that often. Let's take a look at the counters real quick. Now the counters here are what look like 5/8 inch counters. They are on the modern, very thick GMT brown core stock. Now, one of the interesting things that this has is some people like NATO symbols on their counters for World War II games, and some people like vehicle silhouettes on their counters for World War II games. And this version of Russian campaign gives you both. Here's the armor units with the NATO symbols. Here's the armor units with the silhouettes. That's cool. And I guess if you got space on the counter sheets anyway, why not, right? Same deal going to happen with, well, these are the Russians. Same deal is happening with the Germans over here. Indeed there is. So you see the 24th Panzer Corps, 24th Panzer Corps. I'm a NATO symbols guy, but it does depend on game scale too, right? If you're playing a squad level game, I certainly don't want to see NATO symbols. That's inappropriate. So, you know, to each their own on that. We do have information. It looks like order of battle information on the backs of the counters. If I'm not mistaken, and I might be because it's been a long time since I've handled the Avalon Hill edition, those might have been single-sided counters. None of this stuff looks like it's incredibly dependent on the information in the back. And there are 3 counter sheets, which include markers and these odds markers as well. I've never felt necessary to do that, but if you have a game with declared attacks, where you have to like declare all your attacks and then actually execute the attacks, it might well make sense. I'm not sure if that's the case with Russian Campaign or not. Now, if you watch the live stream of Unplayed Classics that I did, what it will end up being a few weeks ago as of the filming of this video, you might recall that Russian Campaign is in fact on that list. And we're going to do an experiment here while live on camera. I'd like to know what this thing is. We're going to get rid of the insert because it's going in the rubbish bin anyway. And, you know, that's expected. That's not a dig on anybody, right? We're going to put one mounted map in there. And I'm going to pick up the other mounted map and stick that in there. And then see if, take the counter sheets out and see if everything fits back in the box. Actually looks like it's really close. And maybe a 3D printed counter storage solution might do the trick. So I'll actually take the paper maps out as well. So if we put, yeah, that ain't working. You've got, I would say, about a little less than 1/4 of an inch of headroom in here. That is enough for the player aids and I think the rule book, but probably not anything else. Yeah, actually, rulebook's on that bottom, you dimwit. So there is basically enough room for all the components except the counters in the box if you put the mounted maps in the box. And I could squeeze the unmounted maps in here too, but I don't know that that does me any good. Could you get all of Russian Campaign's counters in this, say, 1 inch by 8.5 or so inch slot? My guess would be no, not with 3 counter sheets. So I don't think even with my wonderful new 3D printing solutions, I'm going to be able to come up with a solution that'll accommodate this. So it would have been cool. This is really my only complaint, right? It's great that Russian Campaign is back in print. It is a classic game. People have literally played their old Avalon Hill versions of Russian Campaign until they disintegrated under their greasy little fingers. So it's great to be able to get a new edition of Russian Campaign up to the current graphical standards that looks great. You know, it doesn't bulge that much, but then you punch the counters and it's gonna be then you gotta figure out where to put the counters, right? So my really only complaint is, couldn't you have given us like another 15 millimeters, the height of your standard counter tray? That would have been cool. Otherwise, it is great to have Russian Campaign back in print. It's, of course, came out recently from Compass as well, and that edition actually looks very nice. But if you want kind of an updated take on it, that's maybe not like a Russian Campaign on steroids, such as Russia Besieged, then you might want to take a look at this. It does look really nice. My misgivings about the size of the box notwithstanding. And as I mentioned, you'll recall that Russian Campaign is on my to-play list for 2023 because I have never played Russian Campaign. I owned it in the past, back in the days of Avalon Hill, the very end of the Avalon Hill days, to be honest about it. And it's time to rectify some of those gaps in my education. So there will be, and I don't promise that it will be incredibly soon, but there will be sometime in 2023 some kind of playthrough or after-action report or review or some kind of follow-up on this version of Russian Campaign. So thanks, John Kranz. Thank you for watching, and I'd like to give a special shout out to the patrons of Ardwulf's Lair, without whom none of this stuff would even be possible. Please do like the video, please do subscribe to the channel, and if you'd like to do more to support the channel, you can find the link to the Patreon in the video description. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, happy wargaming.